Welcome to the Farming on Purpose podcast, a podcast for farmers and ranchers ready to shift for a stronger future. Today's challenges in agriculture are new, but the grit and determination required to be successful are not. On the Farming on Purpose podcast, you'll hear how producers of all sizes and practices are moving mountains for things they believe in, all in the name of an industry that keeps growing and innovating for a stronger food system and stronger farm families. I'm your host, Lettie Wright, and I'm excited to discuss where producers are finding success, challenging the status quo, striving for better, and keeping our heritage alive, all while producing the food we depend on. Hey there, it's Lexi, and I am sliding into this podcast episode with an opportunity for those who are interested in it. The last time that you sat down to plan your marketing, do you know when it was? Was it hard? Were you confused? Did you feel like you actually should be working on your business instead of trying to make social media posts or write emails or design ads? If that's you, I created a system to develop a full year's marketing strategy and a plan to implement it in 8 hours or less. Yes, really, 8 hours, one day, sit down, plan all of your marketing for the entire year, and actually have the things in place so you can implement it, not just a really pretty outline on a calendar. So you'll walk away with a roadmap for your marketing activities for the next 12 months, confidence in knowing exactly what to do and when to do it, and more time to focus on actually running your business instead of worrying about your marketing. So if you are tired of just winging it or getting stressed out by trying to remember to do your marketing, check out this offer. You can find out when it's ready at farmingonpurpose.com/plan. farmingonpurpose.com/plan. I'd love to see you there. Welcome back to Farming on Purpose. Today I'm here with Lettie Nickell, and Lettie is a fourth-generation farmer, rancher, and she is an entrepreneur, a wedding venue owner, an Airbnb owner, and a member of her community proudly in Southwest Kansas. And I'm really excited to have you here today, Lettie, just to share what your experience and journey back to the farm has been like. I think it's a journey that a lot of people want to make, but are very apprehensive about making because of all the things that sometimes come with it and figuring out how you fit and what's your place there. There's a lot that goes into it. And I know your journey has had its own ups and downs and bumps and figuring out along the way. So yes. Welcome to the podcast. If you want to just tell us a little bit more about yourself and kind of how your journey started, I think that'd be a great place to start.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Lexi, for having me on. I'm excited to be here. And I love advocating for the industry, and I love sharing my story because hopefully it inspires others like me to, others who might be in the same shoes to actually jump and actually make the decision on moving back home. So I graduated from college. It's been it feels like it's been forever ago, but it hasn't been that long ago. In 2017, and I went through the TCU Ranch Management program. I was actually at OSU prior to that and was in an animal science major and was going to go on to vet school, but something shifted in me and I knew I wasn't supposed to go to vet school anymore. And I don't know exactly why. Or I didn't know why at the time. It's hindsight 2020. You look back and now you understand why. But I applied for the TCU Ranch Management program. Excuse me. And in March of that year, I had found out when I was in the middle of the program, is during spring break, my dad had a brain tumor that had came back. So I knew I was supposed to go back to the operation, but I didn't really know how to go back because it wasn't big enough to support another family member. It really could only support my parents. So I decided to take a feed yard job, which it's pretty local to where I'm at. It was 2 hours away from home still, which was a lot better than 8 hours away from home. So I knew I could make the journey on the weekends to come back home and help wherever I needed to, or during harvest or whatever. So I took a feed yard job and I told them I couldn't start until after harvest that year, because my dad was going through radiation. And once he got done with radiation, that's when I started my job. So I'd still help on the weekends and everything, and trying to juggle a full-time job with part-time job. Everybody does it now. Like it's part of making it work whenever you are trying to expand and grow and make it sustainable for a family to live on eventually. So I was working 2 jobs, working my full-time job, coming home on the weekends to help my family. And then I eventually transferred to a different feed yard. And I'm so thankful for my feed yard experience because it taught me so much. It taught me a lot of the accounting side that I didn't know, the business aspect. And I think something that's the older generation might struggle with a little bit is just like the business side of things. We didn't really necessarily go to school for business. We went to like the hard knocks business, and learning to adapt, and which is so valuable. But at the end of the day, we have to make it sustainable. And part of sustainability, I hate the buzzword sustainable because there's so many different things. And a lot of times we want to throw in animal welfare, which is a huge aspect. But at the end of the day, it has to be a sustainable business too. So, that's kind of how I got moved back home. And then in 2019, really, I was just trying to do too much. I was growing a meat company. I was in the feed yard full time. I had just moved up. I was a manager in a manager position. And then we were getting ready to go into the growing season, planting corn, milo, all of the crops. And I knew I had to be home to help my dad because he just couldn't do it anymore by himself. So I stepped away from my feed yard job and then I created a different entity, MC Bar Meat Co., where I would buy my parents' calves and sell beef directly to make ends meet for me to be able to move back home. So that's a little bit background, and through that, several different adventures evolved. I had just remodeled my house. So I was like, I was single. I didn't have a family yet. And I was like, there's really not a good hotel for people to stay. People coming back home to visit on the Christmas holidays and that kind of stuff. So I was like, I'm just going to Airbnb my house and see what happens. And little did I know I was going to be kicked out of my house 3 weeks out of the 4 weeks at the month. And I was like, okay, something has to change here. I love my parents because I'd pack up all my stuff and just move home. I didn't have a lot of personal items that really mattered. So I'd just go stay with my parents. And I got to a point, I was like, I love my parents, but once you flee, like you want to flee, you don't want to move back in with your parents. So I ended up that following year in 2020, we started the Round Top, a wedding venue, which 2020 was a horrible year to start a wedding venue. But we made it work somehow. And the grain bin, I always knew like long term, this was going to be an Airbnb. Like it was my vision. It's kind of what I focused on. And the following year, I was able to finish it. At first, it was just a bar for the wedding venue. We had this 12-foot opening and an awning for people to kind of come up and serve drinks or serve meals out of. And then the following year, I was able to finish it. It takes time to build up capital whenever you're young and just starting with no money. So it took me a while to get to where I have gotten over the last 5 years. But then the Airbnb is really the cash cow of the wedding venue, and it really pays a lot of my bills that I never thought possible. So it allows me to still do what I love on the farm, on the ranch, and be able to work day in and day out there and also pull an income. So I don't pull an income from the operation. The Airbnb is really what provides for me. And MC Bar Meat Co. we've kind of slowed down on just because of, operating costs have gotten so expensive and beef prices are ridiculous. So, and I personally don't like shipping a lot. I really just love focusing on my local people. And I think that's part of the whole sustainability aspect that we talk about is local food, local produce, right? Even if you are in a food desert. So
definitely. Wow. That's quite the journey to be, to have all that evolve so quickly.
Yes, absolutely.
When you guys found out about your dad's brain tumor, was that did that push your decision to come back? Because I know you had said you didn't know or you think.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I left for college, I actually was like, I am never coming back home. This is the last place I want to come back. And it's funny how in my life, I have said, never will I do that. And it's funny how I eat my words every time. So I have stopped saying, never will I do this or never will I do that, because recently we just, like during the wintertime and stuff, the Round Top's pretty low. It's not busy at all. So my husband wanted to change the lighting so he could work in the Round Top. And I was like, I told myself I would never pull farm equipment in the Round Top. And now I have farm equipment in the Round Top. So it's funny how never say never, because you don't ever know what life is going to throw at you. So
Yeah.
it was definitely a big factor in moving home. You know, it was the main reason why I moved back, and just to be close, to be able to help. And I'd help like run budgets or, you know, from afar, do the bookwork type of things that I could when I was at my job in Texas or at my job in northwestern Kansas kind of, or so, but yeah, it was the main reason I moved back home.
Yeah. And when you came back, was that something that you kind of fully stepped into and were like, okay, I'm back, I'm going to figure out how to stay? Or was it like, well, we'll see?
Well, yeah, it was I knew when I moved home, it was a long-term thing. Like, and I waited to move home until I had no other option, really. I mean, I had a bunch of options where I was doing great in my career, but I was in a really low point in my life. Like, I was very ultra successful in my career, but just my personal life was just a wreck. And I had to get away from the environment I wasn't in up there. So it actually pushed me back home. And I'm super thankful because it healed me. And I knew once I moved home, I was home for good. So everything I built was like a long-term vision for my future family, like MC Bar Meat Co. and the Round Top, the Airbnb, because I knew I wanted, like, my end goal is like to be a stay-at-home mom, but I'm so driven. Like, I cannot just stay inside, which there's a place everybody's got their drive, but I'm a very hands-on person. So I knew I had to have my own little niche to work on and my own little thing to work on. And I love building fence. I love like the day-to-day stuff. And I also love the business stuff. So there's a happy balance with everything. So I started building intentionally when I moved home for my future. So yeah, that makes sense.
It's funny how things work out and shape themselves despite what we think will happen.
Absolutely. Yeah. And when I moved home, the biggest reason I didn't move home right away is because I was single. And I was like, there's no way I'm going to find my husband in Western Kansas. Like, I knew all the guys in Western Kansas. I'm like, there's no way my husband's in Western Kansas, God. And little old me, LOL at me. Like I said, never say never, because my husband's from the same town I'm from, and he's older than me, but he was my irrigation man, and he'd be the one I called on problems. And he had been trying for like 3 years, and I was like, no way, I know your type. There's no way I am dating you. I got suckered into a date, and that was the last of that. So,
oh, yeah, what a special first date story. Got suckered into it.
I really did. We just bought a sprinkler from him, and he asked me on this community, you know how communities have galas and stuff for fundraisers for their Chamber of Commerce. And he's like, oh, well, our company WKI bought a table. Do you want to go? And I was like, oh, this is such a customer appreciation thing. I was like, sure. I just bought a stupid, ridiculously expensive sprinkler from you. I'm going to take perks on it, and, yeah, by the end of the night, I knew I was in over my head. I guess that's not just the customer appreciation thing. So that's good. Yeah, it is funny.
It worked out. That's good.
It did work out.
When you came back then, did you jump right into buying the calves from your parents for the meat business, or kind of what did that progression look like of deciding to start?
Yes. Well, I started it before I moved home. Again, I'm a big visionary person, and I have the vision on where I want to go, but sometimes there's little detours along the way. So I actually started the company in 2018, prior to moving home, because I knew like the feed yard was fulfilling, but it wasn't what I was built for. It wasn't what I was made for. I knew I was made to come back home. Like, that has always been my vision. My goal is coming back home. And even when I didn't want to come back home, it's funny how your heart changes over the years. But in 2018, I started the company, and my parents would basically finish out the animal, and then I would buy the finished animal from them and sell it directly that way. And I at first, I think my first year I sold 2 head. It was not very many, but it was a start, and I learned so much. And I'm thankful for the feed yard experience because it taught me how to finish beef. Like, there is a certain way, there's an art and a science to finishing beef. And the feed yard specializes in it, so I'm grateful for the feed yard because it really taught me how to make high quality beef, sustainable beef, nutritious beef. And it's a big learning curve. So it taught me way more than what I could have ever learned on my own. So,
yeah, that's something that's nice, I think, about being from a farm or having parents that are in the industry is it kind of gives you, it's not like a shortcut, but a way to start before you start a big fence, like where you started with just 2 head that first year. Like, that is an incredible learning curve that you can cut. That some people, that would be really hard. So that's a neat advantage to your business and getting started.
For sure. For sure. It is hard. And I'm so grateful for the opportunity they allowed me to do that. Not everybody has that opportunity to be able to do that. So I'm very, very grateful. And my husband and I have 2 quarters that we have behind our house. And, I'm thankful for the knowledge I've had. I've been watching my dad for 30 years now. I've been watching him day in and day out, my grandpas. And now me and my husband are doing it on our own in our own little operation. And it's been so rewarding, like I'm a 4th generation farmer and rancher, but then he's a 1st gen, like this is his first time ever farming and ranching, even though he's in agriculture. So it's so rewarding when it's also your own and being able to build off of your family's operation too. So
really special. And that you guys did make it your own with the thing.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's one thing, when you come back home to, if I had any piece of advice for people coming back home to family operations, is you can't just come home and not bring anything anymore. You have to bring a piece of the pie to make it work. You have to bring something you specialize in. You have to bring a new entity. The whole day and age of bringing in everybody back to the family operation without providing another source of income is gone. I wish it wasn't like that, but it's the absolute truth. You have to bring value back to the family operation if you want it to be sustainable for future generations.
Absolutely. And finding those opportunities to be able to do that is the hardest part and the most exciting part, I think.
For sure.
Stumble on some really cool things like you have. When did you first start to develop the idea of having a wedding venue on the farm?
Oh, I bought this place. I had bought a house in Texas, and then my job, as soon as I bought my house in Texas, my job really took a turn, and I was like, I cannot stay here anymore. So I think it was 4 months later, I sold my house and I moved to Kansas. And within that process, I was able to get a beginning farm. This land came available, and I was able to work with them and get a beginning farm loan from the FSA office, which is, if you have time, that is hands down the way to go. If you don't have time, it's hard because it's the government, so it moves slow, but the interest rates were amazing. There was 0% down. I was able to really get ahead with that loan and buy 2 quarters prior to my husband and I. So that was super nice. And anyways, I knew this place was perfect because it's not too far away from town. It's about 2 miles, and it just had a wedding venue. I knew I would have, it'd be cool. I was like, oh, maybe 10 years down the road, I'll have a wedding venue. It was a long-term goal thing. And then in 2020, my sister got engaged, and she's like, Ceci, I really want to get married in your pasture and in the round top. And at this time, the round top was a dirt floor. There was no concrete. And I was like, okay, but it's going to take some work, and investment. So we got after it, and thankfully I have a very fixer-upper, do-it-your-own type of a family, and we all got busy and worked together, and and finished it. So that was super nice. And the rest is history, I guess.
Yeah.
But it was kind of one of those long-term goals I always saw because there's not any wedding venues in my area. There are now. But prior, when I first built the Round Top, there was no place for people to get married. That was like elegant Western country type of feel. It was very much like the 4-H building.
Mhm.
Nobody could go into a pasture and have the beautifully aesthetic pictures you see on Pinterest in my area. So it's like, oh, it'd be such a cool opportunity to have for my community. So that's kind of where I birthed.
Very cool. Growing up in Western Kansas, that's where everybody got married. 4-H building was the reception place. Like, there's a wedding in town, you know where it is at because it's
absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. No, and nothing wrong with the 4-H building, but it's not your Pinterest pictures. It's for sure, absolutely.
Well, that's really, really cool how that just kind of developed from a vision and then quickly became reality. Did you have to do much marketing or things out in the community to get folks interested in renting it?
Not really. The biggest hiccup that I ran into was just like the economical factor. When you go to Denver and you see these $10,000 rental fees, it's normal for people to pay that. But out here, it's not really common. Obviously, mine doesn't cost $10,000, but it is expensive. It's more expensive than the 4-H building. And so the economical factor was a little bit challenging for people to get over. But I really didn't have to market too much. I marketed online just because it was part of my journey, and I've been sharing online since I moved home. It was kind of my creative outlet. So just like word of the mouth really is my biggest, how people know about me. And then also, I do utilize social media, so that also makes an impact, but most of it was just word of mouth and then social media. So yeah, I never paid for marketing things. I did try to hire a marketing person for a while to kind of manage that for me. And I don't know. It's just hard whenever you have multiple things going on.
For sure. And if you have a very specific way that you're doing things and it's part of your creative outlet, it's really hard to have somebody else step in.
Yeah, it is. And I like doing it, I don't like writing the blog posts that go with it on my website, but I like the creative outlet of creating online socially, or for online social media online.
Yeah. So then when you got the Round Top done, was the grain bin automatically part of that? You said it was a bar at the beginning, or that come a little bit later?
Nope. It was part of the Round Top as well. We went ahead, really, like, the bar aspect of the grain bin was super easy. We just used a plasma cutter and poked a hole in it. And then we had a frame that we stuck in it and welded it together. So that part was really easy to utilize. And then we ended up going ahead and putting electricity in here. That way, if someone had, roaster pans, that kind of stuff. And then also, I think the electric part was the hardest part. And then also getting running water in here was the hardest part because there was already concrete in the grain bin. So we did have to do a little jackhammering. And that's not easy. But so that was always a part of the Round Top. It was just finishing the grain bin part came last year.
Yeah.
Or the year after that. Sorry.
That's okay. And what was, I can see the grain bin now, like where you're at, and it looks, what was the process of kind of outfitting it to be an Airbnb like for you guys?
Really, it was pretty simple to finish. I try to utilize resources I had. So, junk laying around on the we all have those piles. wood laying around. So my brother is a very, very amazing architect. He's just so gifted. And he's the one who did all the welding. I hired him to come in and do all the welding. And then I would do like all the tedious work, like the staining the wood, sanding the wood, that kind of stuff. I did all of that. But we really collaborated on the bin. And I knew I wanted like a loft area and stairs that went up, to the loft area. I didn't want the stairs in the middle of the grain bin as a spiral, just because it's kind of a small space. So you don't want to obstruct the way going in there. So Really, he came up with I told him what I wanted and he came up with the design to make it happen. So
That's awesome. That's really cool. And then when you first put it together, did you always plan on putting it on Airbnb, or did you just think, I'll rent it to people who call and ask?
No, I honestly just put it on Airbnb right away because I live in and that's the cool part about Airbnb. There's so many users that can search for wherever they're going. So I immediately put it on Airbnb. And then if I do have private treaty, which really doesn't happen, most people I just kind of send through the Airbnb app out of liability issues anyways, because they automatically have air cover insurance, which people who do call me privately, I've never had any issues, you know what I mean? But you never know, like you might not have that one instance. So I always just push people to the app. It's 3% commission for Airbnb, or they have a 3% fee, which really in reality for the coverage you get is pennies and nickels. So.
Right. Yeah. That's neat. After you did add the grain bin, then how long was it before you started getting guests?
Oh, it was immediately.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was immediately. I think I finished it November of that year, and we had somebody a couple weeks later. And I didn't have any air conditioning in here prior to that. Like I advertised it as a glamping experience. So there was no heating and no air conditioning. It was what you got. And that was because I was broke. I didn't have any other resources to
start somewhere, right?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So over the years, we've been able to add like a mini split for the air conditioning, a heater for which the mini split is heating and air conditioning. And then we added a wood stove. So yeah,
it's very cozy.
It is real cozy.
Does your business accept online payments, credit cards, or bank transfers? You're going to want to know about a tool called ThriveCart. I've been using this tool on my own website and on clients' websites for years and have been so happy with it. ThriveCart is a software tool you can use to design online checkouts with every option you can dream up. You can sell physical and digital products, connect to loads of other softwares you use for your website, accept payments, email marketing, and more. This is the most powerful tool that I use and the lowest cost one for my business. I recommend it for anyone who accepts online payments, who wants to increase their revenue or average order value on any type of product that you sell. In my show notes, you can find an affiliate link that I have for ThriveCart that gets you a great deal on a one-time payment, no subscription, and also allows me to earn affiliate income from this tool that I really enjoy and recommend. If you have any questions about how ThriveCart could work for your business, feel free to shoot me an email and I'd be happy to chat with you about it. Now, back to the show. Well, I think you've kind of been an advocate of bringing your own piece of the pie or your own entity back to the farm. For you, clearly that's been the meat business and then these rental opportunities. Is that something that you think would be easy for a lot of people to add to their farm, or is it something that maybe is more niche for you guys that just worked out?
No, I really think you could do this anywhere because I am very remote, like 80 miles from the nearest Walmart. Denver's 5 hours away, Wichita's 4.5, Amarillo's 3.5. So I'm super, super remote, and we are, I'll have people in here like January, February. It's very seasonal, so January, February, we don't have a lot of travelers, but I think that's pretty standard across industry. When you look at hotels, Airbnbs, that kind of stuff, unless it's a destination place, but it's pretty standard that your rentals are down in those months. But during my busy months, we'll have four people come through a week, 3 to 4 every week solid. And I think you can do this anywhere. Like I'm a firm advocate of it and I believe you can. And truly, like it's not hard, like my space is a small space and I kept it that way because at the end of the day, my main business is farming and ranching. Like that's my passion. This is just like a hobby that I love, hospitality things, people coming onto our ranch to experience it. And I think it's a great way to advocate for an industry. But I think anybody can do it. It takes me an hour to clean the space, really. It's ready for its next guest. And I can go back to my day-to-day operations. So
Very cool. Well, you mentioned that you don't draw a salary from the farm and ranch, that your livelihood is from these rentals. Is that something that would you have been able to stay on the family farm after you came back without having added that opportunity?
I would have had to find a job. So, and I'm thankful for COVID because now we can work remotely from a lot of places, whether it would have been a sales job or something like that. I would have had to find a supplemental job to be able to still work on the farm. And then it would be a full-time job working the ranch part-time type of a thing, working on the evenings and the weekends. And that's hard. That is very, very hard. And try to get everything done. So,
yeah, for sure. Has that been something that has allowed you kind of as your rentals have grown that you have invested back into the operation? Or is it just like, this is paying my salary?
For sure. Yeah. So with the growing of the rentals and that kind of stuff, we've been able to grow what we do on the operation. So like we're bringing in more calves, we're harvesting more bales, that kind of stuff. So it's helped tremendously. And we made very valuable upgrades on our property as well, too. So like, things like fencing, your capital investments that you have to utilize, and fencing and sprinklers and wells and all that kind of stuff. I'll have wear and tear, but it's hard to make those capital improvements if you're just staying in the red every year.
Yeah. All the really fun stuff to buy.
Yeah.
Like, well, this didn't get me anywhere, but it's
to
have it.
It's necessary.
Yeah.
So.
Cool. Well, we've talked a lot about kind of the logistics and the timeline of your story and how you've added as you went. What have been some of the internal growing points of like things you learned along the way?
Gosh, there are so many. I feel like every stage of growth requires something to go, whether it's an old mindset, an old belief, limiting beliefs, like I don't have enough, there's never enough for me, like, all the stuff I feel like agriculture in general struggles with. Just those limiting beliefs, I've had to really work through them. And me personally, I've utilized the Lord to like break me through some of those limiting beliefs and replace them. Like, I am abundant, I have enough. Just the internal dialogue we tell ourselves on a daily is so important. Whether you're in agriculture or not in agriculture, words speak life and your words matter. What you speak to yourself, what you speak to others, what you speak over your operation. Like there are so many, I believe my biggest battles have been won on a dirt road I walk like every day because just praying over our operation and speaking life over the land and the cattle has made such a huge impact. More than like, I can't put an actual dollar figure behind it, but just from where I remember things being, like 10 years ago prior and now versus now, and bringing God into our day-to-day stuff, hands down, so much better. So there's less chaos, less struggle. There's more peace and direction and all of the things. So I have I could go on and on about that, but it's such a huge, huge part of growing and development and leadership that catapults you forward.
Yeah. I love that you said it that way, that, the words that you speak, they're life-giving. We know that mindset and our perspective affects everything. And we talk about that a lot on this podcast, but I've never heard anybody say it exactly like that before. And I think it's something that I hear different from every person I encounter, but it's the same. And I just love that because you can't hear it enough of like what you are thinking, what you are saying matters so much.
Oh, yeah.
Where your future is going.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Even like, with kids and becoming the mom overnight based, because my husband has 2 kids and just the words I have caught myself speaking over them, like what we say to them determines where they're going to go, and what kind of adult and young individual they're going to be. And if we say, why don't you listen all that? Why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? Instead of, hey, like, you're such a good helper, or, and obviously there's discipline in there, but we've just seen so much improvement. And I do believe it's just because of the words we speak over them and instilling, and in today's day and age, and this goes for your operation, this goes for whatever your belief, trying to change, like speaking those life-giving words, and especially infusing identity into our young kids is so important.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
That's a whole different topic.
Right. It definitely is. It's, and I'm sure from, like you said, like you speaking that into these kids that you're watching grow up, you see it all the day. Every day. It doesn't matter how old they are. It's like, it matters.
Yes, it does matter. So, and they believe, if you think about yourself, like, how much do you hang on to words that someone told you about whenever you were young?
Yeah.
You can think of a teacher, you can think of your parent, you can think of somebody who's instilled a word into you that you have captured and took in part of your identity, when really that's not who you are and that's not who God created you to be. So
it's crazy to think about when we're young, how much those little moments impact us. I see it in my kids all the time, especially from their dad and his dad. When they speak, it's like, oh, that's gospel. They believe it.
I absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Fathers have such more power in their words with identity than mothers do, I think. And that's not anything, but I think that's just part of how God's designed us to be. Whenever we hear from God like that, it becomes part of our identity. And that's just exactly like how our earthly fathers are. Their words are part of their identity. So,
yeah. Well, I enjoy that little tangent, and it's something that it's important to talk about. You don't always get the opportunity to speak on some of those deep things like that. So
absolutely. And I do, we are so much more isolated, I feel like, than others might be. And isolation is a huge combat. There's a whole thing with isolation and loneliness, and the mental game that goes on. And it's so important to feed your brain with positive and uplifting things, whether it's worship music or podcasts you listen to or audio books, whatever it might be. My husband was getting on to me the other day about, why do you always have an AirPod in your ear? And I was like, when I'm working, just doing mundane tasks, is because like I am constantly retraining my brain to think a different way, And there's so many studies about neuroplasticity in our brain and like how we can rewire our brain. And it's so important to make sure I'm putting thoughts in my head on where I want to go, because like words become things. So
yeah, you're speaking my language.
But sorry.
No, I love it.
Perfect.
Well, so like you said, there's something that has to go whenever you move forward. What are some of those things as you've built your business that you've had to let go of? You said some limiting beliefs. Have there been other things that have been like maybe big turning points or big stepping stones?
Yes. And this is just, I feel like every level I've upgraded to, I've had to let like my friend groups have rearranged, and I'm a big believer. And some of them have been seasons of life. Some of them are, lifelong friends. But it seems like the biggest thing you can do for yourself is surround yourself with people who are going where you're going. Community is so important. And if you're trying to go to another level and you keep hitting this brick wall time and time again, you're like, why do I always struggle with that? We all have those things, Look at who you are surrounding yourself with, because a lot of times it's, the people you're around, they believe the same things. We attract like things. We attract what we want. And that is the biggest thing, like, I think I've had to work through, is just partnerships, relationships, friendships, whatever. Some people just simply cannot go with you where you want to go. And it's hard because we love people. So I love people so deeply. But we have to recognize the seasons we're in too. And maybe they'll come back around or maybe they won't. But anytime I have upgraded my life, or upgraded my level in business, personal life, mindset. It seems like my friendships have upgraded or people have faded out or whatever. And I think that's important. And I also think whenever you go to different levels in your business, you also have to let go of different things like outsourcing stuff. And for me personally, like outsourcing my housework was a huge step for me because I was like, oh my gosh, like this is something I should do. Like a homemaker should be able to keep up with the house. And I'm like, there's realizing your strengths and outsourcing your weaknesses to somebody who that's their passion, like that's their niche, you know? So those are super valuable things whenever you continue to grow. And I'm thankful for my husband because he's taught me a lot about that. He's ultra successful in his business and they have 8 different stores, I think, or 5. I can't remember. Sorry, but he's taught me that so well on, you know, and I always thought I never had enough resources like money to pay. But whenever you're going to these new levels, it's crazy how more resources will come in for you to be able to outsource those things. So,
yeah, I think that's a perfect example. And that's a really hard step to take, especially in agriculture where things can change quickly and it's hard to react to things quickly because you have set up in a way that we just have to make slower decisions. Things are more long-term, you know, have a calf hit the ground. The check from that calf is a ways off.
It's so long ways off. Cash flow.
For sure. But that's a really good point that if you can speak that abundance into your life from your mindset and then make those strategic decisions that it works. It just does.
Absolutely. And I have learned, and it's because I had a huge money block for a long time. And I didn't realize it was a money block, you know, and that might be too woo-woo, but I have learned so much about money here lately and just like even what the Lord says about prosperity and wealth and just all of the things. So whatever you're struggling with, like there's a reason for it. And I dig anybody who's listening to really deep dive into it. Because there's resources out there, whether it's a podcast or audiobook or whatever, like it's wild. Whenever you start hitting the same wall over and over again, there's ways to break through to that wall. But sometimes we're just like going through our day to day. We're not really, you know, we check out, just doing the normal things. And there's resources that are coming to us to try to get us to go through that wall. And I just encourage you to like be aware of them, you know, or even if like something bad happened in your life, you know, like something catastrophic. And a lot of times when I've gone through really challenging events, there's always been a brighter side to it, or like the Lord utilized that bad event to help me break through to something I didn't know I was dealing with, but it was there from childhood trauma or whatever it might be. And those events often highlight the things that we need to address. So.
Yeah. And I think what you mentioned there of like, there's resources out there to help you sort past those blocks is so powerful, especially for people who are isolated in rural.
Yes.
Using your social media, using the internet to find those resources and figuring out what blocks you have. This is a thing I think is really important is to maybe like recognize the stories you're telling yourself repeatedly and write them down. If you have like a thought that is constant or repetitive throughout your year or your week, write it down and see if that's something that is a block for you. And then go to social media and see what people are addressing that block. And what you learn from them. Because like you said, sometimes you don't even notice it and you don't even know that it's holding you back.
Yeah, for sure.
You take them to address it.
Yeah. I've learned so much about inner healing, and when you're so broken, like when I moved home, I was so broken. I had to figure out how to heal myself. And inner healing was one of the big things that I worked through. And, a lot of times we have those thoughts rolling through our brain because we partnered with the devil. You know what I mean? It's just a quick agreement, like believing a lie, or it's not something big. It's not like, oh my gosh, you're a bad person. It could be like, oh, I don't know why I don't have enough time in the day. Like just take that, for example. That's a lie we all believe about not having enough time in the day. Like something small and you just to break that agreement, like, no, I refuse to believe that and believe what God says about, and you have to use a scripture. I don't know one off the top of my head for that, but utilize it and then just believe that truth over a lie. So,
that's a super direct application. I like it.
Yeah.
I like it.
It's made a huge difference in my life. So,
yeah. Well, I have appreciated this little TED Talk. I think it's been good for me. I hope it's good for listeners too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh man. So as you look into the future, you've come a long ways in building your business. What's next? What are you dreaming of bringing in next?
Yeah, I would love to expand the B&Bs, eventually. I don't know if that's maybe we look at a rental in Colorado or something like that. I don't know what it looks like yet, but eventually I'd love to expand the rental business. There's so much untapped potential with real estate. Obviously, we know that's our most valuable asset as ranchers and farmers. And I think we get tunnel vision of it's got to be crop ground. So, or pasture land, whatever it might be. So that the Airbnb part, that would be one of them. And then just with the operation day to day, just continue to expand and make it better. And right now, water is our biggest tidbit with resources and everything. And so just focusing on that and making sure we continue to utilize our water the best we can. So,
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, I think this episode has been encouraging and I hope sparks ideas for people who are thinking about coming home and figuring out what kind of piece of the pie they can bring to their operation. If you could give any of those folks advice who are considering that, what would you tell them? Or maybe what would you tell younger version of you?
Yeah. Just go for it. Just, you don't ever have the right things in your repertoire. You're going to learn as you go. You're going to fail as you go. Just go for it. Don't take things so seriously and have fun. So.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast, Lettie.
Oh, yeah. You're welcome.
Where can people follow you, hear more about what you've got going on or what resources you offer?
Yeah, you can follow me on Instagram at Lettie Nickell or TikTok at Lettie Nickell. And then I have a website and it's just lettienickell.com. So pretty simple.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for being here today.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
If you've enjoyed spending time with us today, please take a moment to review the podcast on Apple Podcasts or join the conversation on social media. Do you have a topic you would like to discuss or know someone with a story to share? Apply to be a guest on the podcast at farmingonpurpose.com. You can follow the host of Farming on Purpose, Lexi, on your favorite social media platforms for more content by searching for Farming on Purpose. And remember, if you look around your table and aren't inspired by the people there, it's time to find a new seat.